My name is Paige St. Cyr. I'm a freshman at Lasell College. I am doing an interview for the Veterans History Project. I'm interviewing Colonel Robert Tripp, born November 25th, 1946. Other attendees of this interview are Adam Shahan, Ian Cooney, and John Caradillo. So just to get started, you are from...
Poughkeepsie, New York is where I was born. The Mid-Hudson Valley region is where I grew up. Went to high school in Newburgh, New York.
Okay, and what was your childhood like, including your brothers and sisters, if you had any?
Oh, I have a few. My childhood was probably like most other kids in the 1950s and early 1960s. We were born into a post-war culture. America was feeling good about itself, having coming out of the war as victorious, and we had a pretty good childhood. I had two brothers and two sisters. My two brothers and one of my sisters was from my parents' first marriage. My parents were divorced when I was in high school, and consequently, my mom had another sibling that came later, and we were a pretty close-knit family, still are today.
Okay, out of your other family members, who of them served in the military?
Just me. You're talking about my siblings, of course.
Parents as well?
Oh, my parents. So my dad was a World War II veteran, and much of what motivated me to enter military service was his service in World War II. His and some uncles and some neighbors. It just seemed like every male adult in that period of time that I knew had served in the war. And while they didn't talk much about some of the more intense experiences that they had, they did talk about the war. And I knew it was an important thing that had occurred just before I was born. And I knew that the country's survivability depended on what they did and the sacrifices they made the many years that they were away. And you couldn't grow up in that era without knowing about that. And I wanted to do that too. That's really what motivated me to enter the military.
Which branch of the military did you serve in, and what influenced your decision in joining that branch?
Well, the United States Army. My dad had served in the Army, and it just seemed like a natural fit.
Okay. Were you given any advice before leaving for your service, and how did that impact the decisions that you made?
The advice was just general and subtle. Just be aware of what's going on. Do the best that you can, and don't give up. There'll be some things that will result in some challenges. My dad would tell me, and that I just needed to work my way through them. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and nothing good happens without effort. So.
Okay, so talking about your experiences during the war, you served 2 terms?
2 tours, yes. I was assigned to the 3rd Battalion, 22nd Infantry, Company A, 25th Infantry Division. My first tour, which started in August 1968 and lasted until August of 1969. I returned to the States for a year and served at Fort Benning, Georgia, and then went back to Vietnam in November of 1970 and served until November of 1971.
And how did these 2 tours differ from each other?
Well, the first tour, as I already mentioned, I was with an American unit, the 25th Infantry Division, as the Army refers to it, nicknamed it the Tropic Lightning Division. And I served as a rifle platoon leader and later a company executive officer, also as a weapons platoon leader, a mortar platoon leader with that unit. And I served with American soldiers. I was a lieutenant in that organization. I was a platoon leader, as I said, and a company executive officer, the number 2 in the company. My second tour, when I went back, I was assigned as an advisor to the South Vietnamese Army, the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, which was our allies in that conflict. And I was served at a division headquarters as an advisor to the G3 Air, responsible for all air assets within the division, that we would get either from Army air units or from Vietnamese air units, as well as Air Force tactical air support. We also helped to clear targets for B-52 strikes, things of that nature. I worked, as I said, in division headquarters with my South Vietnamese counterparts.
Were you awarded any medals, and if so, which ones?
I was awarded the Bronze Star with V device and 3 oak leaf clusters. I received a Purple Heart much later in my career. It kind of followed me for a number of years before I finally got it. But Vietnamese awarded me the Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry with Bronze Star, as well as the Vietnamese Staff Service Medal First Class.
Would you like to discuss the circumstances regarding being awarded those?
Well, the Bronze Star with V was primarily, as well as the Purple Heart was a result of a firefight, I believe, at Fire Support Base Washington, if my memory serves me well, going back a ways, in Tay Ninh Province, and June, I think it was late June of 1969. It was not long before I left country, and I was just doing my job as far as I could see. It's funny when you come under fire like that. A good unit is almost like a well-oiled machine. They kind of respond to situations and things. And while I was the platoon leader and directing what was going on and in keeping in communication with my company commander and advising who was in the center of this fire base, and there were other platoons on my left and right as well, and we coordinating fires and things of that nature. But the soldiers responded pretty much to what was going on in front of them. They did not need a lot of direction from me. They were able to take that on. I received recognition at the end of this thing because of their actions, but certainly the award is not mine alone. They helped me earn it, and the Vietnamese award was for the same action, basically. The Purple Heart, I did receive some minor shrapnel wounds in my hands, my arms, nothing serious, nothing that required me to be evacuated to a hospital, and just pulling metal out of my shoulder probably for even after I got back to the States for a little while. But it was nothing serious. Certainly, I saw soldiers wounded far more seriously in the course of the year that I was there, especially the first tour, and was awarded the Purple Heart for much more serious injuries than I received.
So after the war, regarding homecoming, what was the experience of coming home like for you?
Well, as you may know, the country was greatly divided over that conflict the longer that it went on. And it's unfortunate, unlike the current conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, where, whether you're for or against it, you realize it's the administrations, the members of government, the politicians that decide whether or not the Army or the armed forces are going to go into conflict. During Vietnam, unfortunately, many people, because of the division and because of the emotions that welled up inside of people based on their beliefs for or against, it was not a pleasant experience. They blamed the soldier if you were against the war, because the soldier went and followed orders and did what they considered their duty. They were ostracized for it. They took issue with the politicians as well, but they were really sometimes even downright nasty to soldiers. That's not the case today, fortunately, and it seems like America has come around and appreciates what a soldier did, regardless of their feelings about the conflict that they might be engaged in.
And you went to college. Where did you attend?
I went to North Carolina State University, and I did that after Vietnam. I actually had 2 years of technical school after I graduated from high school. And in those days, unlike today, and because of the need for commissioned officers, I was able to go to officer candidate school without a college degree. The 70s started to roll around, and Vietnam was winding down, and they were putting officers without degrees out of the service. So I decided to go back to school, and I went to North Carolina State to kind of consolidate what might be a little bit, a number of years, but eventually I did get my degree from NC State, and went back. I might want to add too that I maintained my military membership first in the Army Reserve and in the National Guard. I never really left the service. I left full-time and active duty service during that period of time. And through my National Guard assignment, I was able to return to active service when I had my degree, and which was a benefit, and was able to finish a military career.
So you did the ROTC in Brockton. How did your time in the military affect?
Well, one of the things as a military leader, especially if you've been a military leader in a combat environment, leadership. There are people, I guess, that leadership comes naturally to, and there are others that have to learn it. And many of us make mistakes while we're going through that educational experience, I might put it. Mine was in Vietnam and other positions I had in the Army. And I wanted to share that with young people. And of course, the high school junior ROTC is not a commissioning program, as is the senior program in colleges and universities. It's more of a leadership development program. So I wanted to share that experience, my experiences, and how leadership is important in any role, any profession, not just the military. I certainly made mistakes along the way. In Vietnam, I was a young 21-year-old lieutenant, and 22-year-old lieutenant. I was barely out of my teens, and here I had 25, 30 soldiers under my, some of them much older than me, and all of them when I first got there with a lot more combat experience than but I outranked them. And certainly I made some mistakes in the early years. Fortunately, nobody was hurt because of those mistakes. But people in leadership or managerial roles and in business or industry are going to make errors, and they learn from those errors. And I just thought that the leadership experience and sharing that with young people would help them in their futures. And so I decided to do that, and I only planned to do it for a few years and ended up doing it for 19. So I had a second military career after my main military career.
Additionally, how has being in the Vietnam War affected the rest of your life, including the decisions that you made?
Emotionally, I guess I'm blessed that I didn't experience a lot of the post-traumatic stress disorder that some have, and I'm very grateful for that. I have there are times now when loud noises will attempt to send me to the ground, and I guess it's just a natural reaction that'll be with me for the rest of my life. But there's no long-term side effects. Initially, after coming back, there were some bad dreams. I have been diagnosed with an Agent Orange-related illness that I'll have to live with for the rest of my life, a chronic ailment, so that's not really affecting me a whole lot now because it's under control with medication, but somewhere down the line it may have an impact, and I'm just not going to worry about that. I take each day as it comes. I feel good now. I wouldn't even know that I had this thing had the docs not told me and put me on some medication. I don't know. I guess an experience like this, and I suspect that law enforcement officers have, in some of the challenges they have to face and the dangers they have to face, I think give an individual maybe some wisdom, some insight that others that haven't experienced those things may not have, in terms of valuing life and valuing each day and not wasting time with petty bickering with other people. And I think it's, you need to value every moment. I think that's, when you're close to meeting your maker, so to speak, I think you do value life a little bit more.
Okay, and you are recently retired. So what are your plans now that you've retired?
Yes, well, travel. My wife and I have just returned from Europe. I was assigned to Europe. One of the good things about my service, we lived in Germany for 2 years and Italy for a year, and we've just recently returned to Europe and did some reminiscing over there, visited some new places, doing some travel. We have 3 kids and 6 grandkids, so it's affording us the opportunity to see them a little more frequently because they don't live here in New England where we live, so it requires some travel. That's the big thing. Seeing them more frequently, I think, is going to be the key to this retirement. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Today I'm interviewing Edward C., born on July 22nd, 1946. He served in Vietnam in the U.S. Army. Edward's highest rank in the U.S. Army was a sergeant. We are recording this interview in Newton, Massachusetts. My name is Casey Smith, and I will be interviewing Edward C. Also present for this interview is Asia Stupart and Nick Meza. This interview is conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. So to start off, where were you born and raised, and how was your childhood?
I was born in Austin, Minnesota in 1946 to a mother and father who gave birth to 7 other children. We had a large family, but everybody in those days had large families.
So how many brothers and sisters? How many
I
brothers?
have 5 sisters, and I had 2 brothers.
Okay. Did you have any other family members in the military?
My father was in the Navy during World War II, but no one else was.
Okay. How did you feel about the war in Vietnam previous to going?
Before I went to Vietnam, I took a history course on Vietnam before I finished college, and up until that point, I was somewhat okay with the war, ambivalent at most. After that, I took that course on the history of Vietnam, and I came to understand what happened during the failure to abide by the Treaty of 1954, which divided the country in half. I realized this war was a pretty strange war.
Mm-hmm. Now, were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted. I was one of the last group of people to be drafted.
Okay. Now, how did your family and friends react to the news when you told them that you were drafted to go to Vietnam?
Well, I was planning to go to the Peace Corps. I'd already been accepted to go to the Fiji Islands, and everybody was disappointed that I wasn't going. And but the fact of the matter is, they accepted it.
Mm-hmm. How was leaving home to go to training camp?
Leaving home, I remember leaving home where your parents take you to the local Navy, local reception center. There's a place where in the hometown, people who are being drafted that day go, and there is a pickup point where you are put then on a bus, and then we were driven to Minneapolis, and then we were put in a reception center there. And then we moved to other parts of the country.
Okay. How was training camp for you?
When I first went into the Army, the training camp was, it was a challenge. I remember when we first arrived there, we were put in we flew from Minneapolis to Milwaukee to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And when we got out of the plane in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, they told us to go into a aircraft building where they position aircraft and store them. And they told us to sit on these bleachers, and they had a barrel in front of the bleachers, and they told everybody with guns and knives to go put their guns and knives inside the barrel, and the barrel quickly filled up. So these guys were coming to war with their own guns. And then what happened, we were taken to basic training, and we were put in a reception center where we went through a series of tests. We were given a uniform, we were given shots, and one of the quickest ways to get cured from a shot and the pain of a shot is to do a push-up. They taught us that. My arm never hurt after getting any kind of shots because we always did push-ups right afterwards. And after we went through the place where we were given tests to determine our capabilities and willingness to do certain things. They asked you, for example, on these tests, whether you like to camp, whether you like to hunt, whether you like the outdoors, whether you liked physical challenges, whether you liked anything that might be a way of identifying you as a candidate for a particular job in the military. I wanted to be a chaplain assistant. I was told before I went in that that's a good, honest job. And I didn't realize until after I got out of the Army that a chaplain assistant is probably somebody who writes a lot of letters home telling somebody that their son or daughter has died over there, or is wounded. And but anyway, I failed that exam. I did not type well enough to qualify as a chaplain assistant. So I decided that the way to get through this military was to suggest that I was the best soldier they could possibly have. And I told them the truth about my hunting and outdoor activities that I engaged in as a child, because we used to do a lot of that stuff. And they then decided I was a good candidate to be in the infantry, 11B10, I mean. It's called the Military Occupational Specialty, an MOS. So after that, we just engaged in training.
Now, was it hard for you to adjust to the military life, and what was the hardest part?
The hardest part was the level of hostility and aggression you face on the part of the NCOs and on part of the officers who are trying to train you to be a soldier. I learned, for example, one time we were doing a winter exercise out in the field, so to speak, and it was cold out. And I wanted to talk to an officer about some instructions I had given, and he walked away from me, and I said, "Lieutenant," and he walked back and he reamed my backside for not calling him sir. And then he said, "Why didn't I salute him?" Well, what that taught me was to never salute an officer in the military. And when I was in Vietnam or on any other occasion, if I saw an officer coming towards me, I would take a right-hand turn and walk at right angles to them and avoid saluting them. I never did salute an officer ever in the military.
Now, where did you serve in Vietnam?
I served in, I flew into Vietnam and I landed at Tan Son Nhut Air Base. And right away this is a very long flight. It's like 18 hours. And you fly from San Francisco up through Alaska, down through Japan, and then to Vietnam. It's about 18 hours. And time-wise, and you leap forward into another day. And we flew into Tan Son Nhut Air Base in Bien Hoa, South Vietnam. And then we got off the plane and we were given lunch, or something like lunch, and or it was called lunch. And then we were assigned to our units. They asked you which division you wanted to serve in. And they told us the layout of the country. And they said, if you're from a state in the United States that is cooler, you may want to go to the Central Highlands or to go to northern Vietnam. And I thought, okay, I'll go to with the 4th Infantry Division to the Central Highlands. And so we flew from Bien Hoa Air Base up to Pleiku, and we got off the plane there and went through 2 weeks of preparation for going out into the field. And what they did at that time was they trained us how to fight and survive. Up until this point, we were told how to fight in a combat formation and how to use our weapons in an efficient manner and most effectively. And, and we were trained on measuring the distance, on how far a machine gun can fire, how far you can throw a hand grenade, how far you can shoot a light anti-tank weapon, all this stuff. We were trained on a bunch of different weapons. But at this point, they started to take us out into these short patrols, and they said when you get into a conflict, what you need to do is find the biggest tree you can find and keep your head down. And if you have to fire your weapon, you fire it over your head with a single arm and fire away and keep your head down. The idea was to survive, and that's what they were training us to do.
Now, when you arrived in Vietnam, what was your initial thoughts?
It's hotter than hell. It was really, really humid and hot. It was also, I was stunned by the size of the operation. It was huge. I did not imagine it being that big. It was very, very big. And it was hot. It was very large. Also, what drew my attention was the fact it was, because we were in the infantry, there was this immediate anxiety that anything can happen at any time. And for the next 420 days, I lived at a high level of anxiety and fear of dying every day.
Now, did you witness any action while you were in Vietnam?
I was not in any hardcore firefights where we have massive units assembling and marching into a battle zone. My unit went into Cambodia when Nixon ordered the American forces to go into Cambodia, but I was working on the civil affairs team at that time. But when I was out in the field and on other occasions, we might come under small arms fire, or there were times when somebody might strike a landmine and blow themselves up, or a truck up, or there were other things that happened. We might have been fired on, and that sort of thing.
Now, how did you personally deal with what you saw in Vietnam, particularly the horrors of war?
Well, by the time I'd gotten over there, the war was pretty, it was pretty much decided we were going to get out, and it was a situation where you fully had to realize you're there, you're not going to win this war, we're not there to win it anymore, your idea is just to come home. And what you want to do is to come home in one piece, and what you're trying to do over there is survive. And that's all you're thinking about is surviving. And you're thinking about surviving in terms of your buddies, the people you're with. That's all you're concerned about. And other than that, whether we were there because we were doing the honorable thing, or whether we were there to save the world from communism, didn't matter to us. We were simply trying to get home. Yeah.
Now, did you form any friendships with any of your fellow soldiers?
Yeah, I had a lot of friends over there. I had friends out in the field, and then I had friends in the Mountain Yard Village and in the Civil Affairs program. But the thing is, when you're in the military, you often say, well, we'll become really good friends and we'll see you later. And I did see a couple of them later, but we haven't kept in touch. Yeah. But, I think about them. I still think they're terrific guys. We had some really good times together, and I wish them all well. I have nothing but the utmost respect for all of them.
Now, were you able to stay in contact with your family and friends while you were at war?
Yeah, I was. I wrote to my parents once or twice a month, and they would often write, and I'd write back. And I had a girlfriend who went off and found somebody else, and but that's all I pretty much had contact with.
Now, what did you do in your downtime when you were in Vietnam?
Well, downtown in Vietnam was sometimes there were drugs that were people did. Marijuana was fairly common. In terms of downtown, we often just, in the Mountain Yard Village, we slept. We didn't do much else. I mean, in the Mountain Yard Village, and I'll get into this later, but we lived in a compound inside the village, and you couldn't go for a walk outside the village because unless you were armed and you were on a patrol, you were stuck in this place. So what I did a lot was read. I had my brother send me books, and I did a lot of reading. And I learned a lot while I was there.
Now, do you remember where you were when the war was ended, when it finally ended?
Yeah, I was in my family's living room, and across the nation, everybody turned on a front door light, and we did, and I remember doing that. Now I'm confused about whether we mean the United States finally pulled out of the war and they signed that peace treaty, or when the North Vietnamese moved down into South Vietnam and overtook the entire country. That was in 1975. I don't remember exactly where I was then.
Now, how was it returning home from the war? How did the general public react to your homecoming?
Complete indifference. I did not have a single person walk up to me and say, "Thank you for spending 14 months over there saving this nation from communism." My father intentionally had me come downtown to his law office so he could parade me down around downtown, and not a single person came up and said, "Thank you very much." And I found that rather embittering. Mm-hmm. By this time, a lot of us are pretty bitter about what happened over there.
Mm-hmm. Now, was it difficult to adjust back to regular life after coming home?
Well, what happened to me was I thought because I wasn't suffering from true combat fatigue, I'd go get a job right away. And 2 months after I was home, or 3 months, I got a job as a probation officer in a small southern town. And I started a probation department in the very community that Nat Turner's uprising had occurred. So, and my job was to, they had just desegregated the school systems, and my job was to ease the community and the juveniles and the adults through the process as best I could as a probation officer. And it was a rather tense situation. I had one kid who beat up a school principal. I had a lot of the students in that town, the black students, were required to go to a junior high school named after Nathan Bedford Forrest, who is the father of the Ku Klux Klan. And they hated that idea and were madder than hell about it. But that's what I did. I did that for a couple of years, and then I said I really needed to see the rest of the country, and I took off and traveled around the United States and went to Europe for a while and came back. That all took about a year.
Now, how did your experience in Vietnam affect you? Does it still affect you to this day?
I don't have nightmares or I don't have flashbacks. I have had them in the past. I am more, I can read material about the war today and I get really angry. I do get very angry about the fact we have been in 2 other wars that weren't necessarily needed to the extent that we have been involved. I find that very disappointing. But I have even considered now what I'd like to do is go to North Vietnam, and not North Vietnam, but go to Hanoi, and I would like to go to the War Memorial Museum there and pay my respects. I am deeply sorry for what we've done to that country. We killed about 1 million Vietnamese during that war, and yet the strange thing about it is their population increased. From the start of the war to the end of the war, their population doubled or tripled. Yeah.
Now, by being in the war, did it change your viewpoint on what was going on and what occurred in Vietnam?
Well, I being in the war gave me a sense of that I really understood what was going on because of the nature of my work over there. I came to understand what it was like to be in the field and looking for somebody to shoot with a weapon. I also came to understand what it was like to work in a mountain yard village and be part of what was called the Civil Affairs Program, or also what became known as the Counterinsurgency Program. It was always called that. And then I was, one of the jobs, my last job I had in Vietnam I was the sergeant in charge of the Kit Carson Scouts. And the Kit Carson Scouts were former NVA soldiers and Viet Cong soldiers who had changed sides during the war and now were scouts for American field units. And they were assigned 2 for each platoon, 1 for each squad. And these guys went through their own problems. I had one guy shoot his hand off. He was so conflicted about being a scout for an American unit as well as being a Vietnamese who was, in a sense, serving the enemy. And his solution was to take his hand off.
Now, what medals did you receive from being part of the war in Vietnam?
I received a Bronze Star for my service in Vietnam.
Now, could you tell us a little bit, while you were in Vietnam, were there, what did you experience with the Vietnamese people?
Well, I found the Vietnamese people to be very interesting in the sense that they were, where we lived in the Pleiku region and the An Khê region, most of the Vietnamese we saw are very poor. I was looking at a travel site yesterday about Vietnam. You can take some very nice tours of Vietnam now. And none of the cities listed on this travel site include Pleiku, which means it's not a very interesting place to go. It still it was a place that was very, very poor. People lived in shanties. They lived as humbly as possible, and they just tried to get by. And to me, we were fighting a war that in some ways simply made their lives worse. And if there had been peace, maybe these people could have been able to raise their standard of living, but I'm not sure.
Now, while you were there, it's brought up a lot that you really didn't know who you could trust, may it be adults and or children. Did you experience this at all?
Well, I had some, when I was out in the field, I had some young Vietnamese kids steal some property of mine. When I was in the Mountain Yard village, when we were converting the village over from American to Vietnamese supervision, which I really wondered how that would go because of the conflict between the Mountain Yards and the Vietnamese. I had a cat. And the Vietnamese, I went into Camp Inari, the major base camp for the 4th Infantry Division, on a Saturday and came out later that afternoon, and my cat, which was a lovely Siamese cat, was missing, and it never did show up. And I eventually conducted an investigation and came to realize that the Vietnamese soldiers had taken my cat and brought it into Pleiku, where it was then probably butchered and used as food.
Now, what do you remember like the most from your experience there?
Well,
one prominent, some prominent things.
I think I don't know, if you're out in the field, the thing that most prominent is the uncertainty of it. It's how your everything you do is intended to enhance your survival. And when you're digging a foxhole, or what they call a fighting position, and you're digging it shoulder deep, you have to also make it not so deep you can't get out of it. But the fact of the matter is, everything you're doing is there to enhance your survival. And that becomes prominent. You also become, out in the field, the thing that is most evident is the absolute uncertainty of everything, because you don't know when anything is going to happen. One of the purposes of the Kit Carson Scouts were to identify booby traps that the Vietnamese had put together. They had tiger traps, for example, which is a 12 by 10 hole in the ground that's 10 feet deep, and in the bottom of it is full of poisonous bamboo stakes that if you fall on them, you're going to kill yourself, or you're not going to get out, or there may even be a tiger in there. Because there were tigers, snakes, and other things. At one time we came across a 20-foot a python snake, which we shot up. There was another time where I came across a 8-foot king cobra snake that I almost stepped on. I was walking out of a building, and I was about to step down, and I saw about 3 feet of a tail go by, and I thought, if that's 3 feet of a tail, what's on the other end of it? So I said, that cannot be a small snake. And I said, I don't know if it's waiting for me on the other side. So I walked back into the room and I said, guys, there's a big snake out there. And they said, what kind? I don't know. It's black. And so they ran outside and they threw sandbags on it. And this snake stood up about 3 feet high with its mouth open, hissing at us and its big hood on. And it was terrifying. And then they kept it around the base for a while. And the officer said, you're going to get rid of this snake now or else. And so they got rid of the snake. They let it go. They didn't kill it. And that I don't know whatever happened to that snake. I also one time was walking through the Mountain Yard Village, and I stepped right over a snake. I was looking down, and as I was stepping, I was straddling a snake. It was it was about 4 or 5 feet long, and I know if I had stepped on it, it would have bit me. Mm-hmm. I was very lucky.
Now, based on your brief history, we'd like you to go off it a little bit. So, starting in January 1969, what can you tell us about that?
Well, that was a time period where, when you join the Army, the big shift in going into the Army is the fact that you're going from a world where, as we are conducting this interview, it's nice and polite and everybody's sweet and kind. When you join the military, you enter a world where everybody is either an asshole or they're nice or they're a friend. Mm-hmm. And officers and sergeants you assume are assholes, mm-hmm. and so you leave them alone. You try to avoid them. Mm-hmm. You don't say anything to them that you don't have to. And you conduct all your affairs by having a very low profile. So you don't want to draw attention to yourself. So you do everything they ask you to do, but you at the same time are in a constant state of fear, in the sense of, what are they going to ask you to do that you can't do? Now, one of the things that happens when you go into the military is you have to do all this physical activity. You might have to run 2 miles, and then you come back and they tell you to light it up. So you're smoking cigarettes and running 2 miles. Yeah, it's surprising we didn't have heart attacks right there. But you're also running in all your equipment. You're not running in sneakers or sweat clothes. You're running in your uniform. And all of that was a big shock. Along with the weather, it started to snow and it started to rain. It was just pretty lousy. And then so on and so forth. We also started using a lot of guns.
Mm-hmm. Now, it says here that you were sick with bronchial pneumonia.
Yeah, when I entered the Army, I was starting to get sick, and then I was standing in line to eat, and I couldn't breathe. And I said, I've got to go to the sick call, and I went to sick call, and they put me in the hospital for 5 days. Now, that was a kind of a good thing, because what happened was it gave me enough time to calm down and relax and to kind of get a perspective on the military. But also, I wasn't gone long enough where they recycled me. If you are gone more than 5 or 6 days, let's say you're gone more than 6 days, what they do is they recycle you. They put you back in line, back in the start of the line, or they put you and you have to start all over again. But they kept me in my unit, and I was able to go through the rest of the exercises. But it was exhausting having bronchitis. Yeah.
Now, moving into February, it says that you were experiencing this weather of rain and snow, and going into qualifying weapons. What can you tell us on that, about the different weapons?
Yeah, we had to shoot M14 rifles, and in order to get your not your combat infantry badge, but your sharpshooter badge, you had to be able to shoot at a target that was 400 yards down range, maybe. I'm not sure how far away it was, but you had to get good at shooting a rifle. Now, these weapons, they call them, are they're fairly heavy. They weigh about 8 pounds, and they have a wooden stock and a bolt action to them and a clip and all this stuff. And you learn to march with them and carry them around, and they became comfortable with you and that sort of thing. But you had to be able to hit a target in order to move on and graduate from this. So you spent time out at the range firing, and and learning how to shoot in different positions and that sort of stuff. And once you did that, they thought you were through with basic training as far as weapons were concerned. It wasn't until I went to infantry school that I learned to shoot a lot of different weapons.
And how was it learning and using hand grenades?
Well, hand grenades, the first thing you learn about them is they're heavy. And then you learn how to throw them, how far. Part of the learning is how far you can throw them. Most of the time you can't throw them more than 25 or 30 feet. And what you need to do once you throw them is to get down right away. You cannot just throw them and watch them. You have to throw them and get down. And they're a weapon that you use very, very carefully.
Now, moving into March, it starts by saying that you were at Fort Polk.
Yeah, we took a long ride from Fort Campbell to Fort Polk, Kentucky, and the thing I remember most about it was that we rode in a bus. Now, there were 4 or 5 buses heading down to Fort Polk, and this is where they do all the infantry training. And I remember sitting in the back of the bus with 2 other guys in a seat that was designed for 2 people. So what happened was I spent much of that trip awake. And when I got into Fort Polk and we were assigned to our units, I was just absolutely exhausted. I was falling asleep standing up. And it was a really tough ride. But what happened with Fort Polk was the weather changed quite a bit from Fort Campbell, and it was really very pleasant. It was 75 degrees. It was never too hot, never too warm, and never too humid. And because they had had a meningitis epidemic through the camp, they decided they could not afford to give us too much exercise. So we were trucked around everywhere we went. We didn't have to walk very far or march far. And so we rode around these big open trucks, like semi-trailer trucks, except the back of it was open up to the sky. And you could put 100 people in these trucks. And we learned how to do various exercises at night and how to do it during the day and how to shoot different weapons. And this is where we learned I learned to shoot an anti-tank weapon, a 50 caliber machine gun, which it has a bullet that's this long. It's almost a foot long. It's about 8 inches long. It must be 6 or 7 inches. But we shot 45 caliber pistols. I realized how powerful they are. And then what happens is you get really gung-ho about weapons. You tell yourself if you're going to Nam, you want all this stuff. You want a 45, you want a rifle, you want hand grenades, you want all this stuff. All this stuff, all this stuff. Until you get over there, you don't realize how much all this weighs. Because you start loading it up and you're carrying around 30 pounds worth of weapons plus another 30 or 40 pounds in your field pack, and you're just killing yourself at around 80 pounds. You're carrying almost more than you weigh.
Now in April, it says that you actually went to Vietnam and...
No, that's when I went home for leave.
Oh, okay.
That's when I learned... No, that's when I went home for leave, and I went home through April and then part of May, and then I went to Vietnam.
Now in May, it says that you left home. You had a girlfriend for a time and see the end of the war coming.
Yeah, I could see the end of the war, and I could see the end of that relationship with that girl. So that was something that came hand in hand there. But in early June, I got on a plane and flew to Vietnam.
Now, how was, in June, how was going to Vietnam and preparing to leave for there?
That was, I think, more difficult for my family than I realized. Everybody was very pleasant. Everybody was very reassuring. Nobody seemed to be going crazy. But it was the beginning of a terrible ordeal for my family because until much later did I come to realize how much stress I really put on the family. And when I came home, my family was in a great deal of stress. And some of those folks did not really work their way through it very well. But yeah, so so I flew from Minneapolis to San Francisco, San Francisco to Vietnam. But one thing that I wanted to tell you about, I think was interesting. When we flew to San Francisco, we were in this reception center, and they give us the final equipment we're going to wear and some other stuff and other stuff. And what they do is they have some phone booths there, and I was watching these guys use the phone booths, and I thought, yeah, that's interesting. And I thought they must have a hell of a lot of money. They're staying in there for a long time. But then I thought some of these phone booths are empty, so I decided to go over there and call up. And I called up my girlfriend, and I talked to her for well over an hour, and we had a delightful conversation. It was really very nice. And I realized that after I wrote to her later, I asked her, did she ever get a bill for that phone call? And she said, never. And I think what happened was the Army paid for that phone call. And they never told us they were free. They just said, here's a phone booth, go use it. And we did. It was really pretty nice of them. Yeah.
Now, one thing that stood out to me here is these three words that I think, most soldiers, had these feelings while they were there, and it says it's hot, hungry, and scared.
Yeah, this is a common reaction. Sometimes you feel you don't get enough food. Sometimes you're obviously scared of the situation. You're always tense. You're always vigilant about what's going on. Any noise draws your attention, and you're hot. It depends on the seasons. If you're in the rainy season, it's not so hot. It's just very humid. During the dry season, it can get hot. But there is a period of time in the Highlands during the dry season, but I think it was around Christmas, it would even get a little cool. It wouldn't get cold, but it would get cool. And you might get in the 60s instead of 80 at night. But where I was at, the temperature was fairly reasonable most of the time. Yeah.
Now, how were the patrols while you were there?
Patrols were, if you're walking point on a patrol, you're the first guy in line down a trail. Now, this may be a well-worn trail, or it may be a trail that you have to carve with a machete. And if we walked often down tank trails. These were trails that were forged by a tank convoy or whatever, and they wore the treads through, and you marched down them. Those were sometimes dangerous because the North Vietnamese, Viet Cong, realized you're going to walk down there probably, so let's set up some landmines. So the safest thing to do is really not walk down the trail, even though it's very inviting, instead of trying to slug your way through a jungle with a machete where you're chopping at everything and anything in front of you. And that can wear you out after an hour chopping on the jungle and that sort of thing. So when you go on a patrol, if you're walking point, you're the first guy in line, and often you're expected to clear the way. But because I'm not a very big guy, I thought, screw it, these guys behind me can pitch in. So what I would do is I would walk forward, and if I ran into some stiff grass or something, I simply ducked down and climbed forward. And to me, that made a hell of a lot more sense than trying to hack my way through a jungle and then facing a squad of Viet Cong who are simply shooting at the first guy flailing away with a machete. To me, I was already in a fighting position. If they want to shoot, I'll shoot at those SOBs too. And the fact is that patrols were a lot of work. You're up and down mountains. You're carrying ammunition. You have to be careful about your feet. If you don't keep your feet in good condition, if you don't keep your boots on right, if you don't maintain hygiene, you can get jungle rot. Your feet start getting athlete's feet, and other things are going to happen to it. So a lot of things are going on. Some people have experienced heat exhaustion where they're climbing up and down these hills and mountains, and they just run out of gas, and you look at them and you say the only thing they need is a lot of water, so you pour water on them, and they do resuscitate. But the fact of the matter is these these patrols, you never knew what was going to happen, and you didn't know whether the officer you're dealing with really had your interest in mind, or was he just trying to earn points and that sort of thing. We had a commanding officer when I was out in the field for a company whose idea was they'd say, you are ordered to go 5 kilometers, or you're ordered to go 7 kilometers down this tank trail and then to bivouac for the night. Well, what he would do is go down the tank trail 5 kilometers, and then he would send patrols out for the next 2 kilometers. This worked for a while in his favor in Vietnam, and then eventually the brass back in base camp decided to get rid of this guy because he wasn't really following orders. So what happened one day was about 5 helicopters came out there with every bit of brass in the battalion from all kinds of colonels and majors and every SOB back there. And I'm starting to talk like a real soldier. These guys were going to be sure that we weren't going to revolt against this takeover that was happening and this replacement, because this guy was fairly popular, and he was simply removed and replaced with another guy who was a career military guy and committed to the war in some ways, but he wasn't committed to the point of being foolish. He just was going to handle things as they wanted him to. One of the interesting things that happened to me later on was when I was back at the major base camp, Camp Inari, I ran into this captain who had been removed, and he sat down with me and he said, I want to have a nice talk with you. And we talked for about a half hour about what the men thought of him, what I thought of him, what was our understanding of his job he did. And I tried to reassure him that I understood he was simply trying to save our lives and not waste it on a simple or a stupid military action we didn't need to undertake. Yeah.
Now, going into the summer months, how was June, from June to September in Vietnam?
June to September, I'm still out in the field, and we're going through more patrols. We've had some people injured through landmines and so on and so forth. By this time, I'm getting fairly comfortable being in the infantry out in the field. By this time, you're getting a sense of what they want us to do. You're developing some sense of confidence, and I think I'd even been promoted to a specialist 4th class by this time, and it was okay. What you start to realize how people get by. You realize, for example, the military gives you free cigarettes, they give you free candy, they give you free soda, and they give you free beer. You never haul around the free beer. It's no damn good, because you drink it, you're just going to get exhausted. So you drink. I learned to appreciate warm Coca-Cola. I can drink a lot of warm Coca-Cola. It doesn't bother me at all. And to me, it gave me a energy boost, and it refreshed at the same time. You cannot give me a warm can of 7-Up. To me, that's like drinking, I don't know what, but it's terrible. But by then, I've become accustomed to what it's like out in the field and serving guard duty at night and cutting fire bases and dealing with the anxiety and going on patrols and so on and so forth and doing other things.
Now, going from October of 1969 to March of 1970, how was that?
I was, by this time, I've gotten a job on the Civil Affairs program. Now, this is a strange thing that happened to me. I was sitting in the, waiting to be taken out in the field when I first came into the country. I mean, my first foray out into the war zone. And I was sitting next to a guy named Zimmerman, and he and I were both ready to go out and serve our country. A clerk walks up to Zimmerman, and he says to Zimmerman, "Can you type?" Zimmerman says, "Sure, I'm a college graduate." And I was too, and therefore what happens in the military is college graduates hang out with other college graduates. And I looked at Zimmerman, he looked at me, and he said, I'll see what I can do. And what happened was, 3 or 4 months later, Zimmerman sent me a note saying there's an opening on the civil affairs team. Do you want me to see if I can get you an interview for that position? And I wrote him a letter saying, yeah. And what he did was get me out of the field. And I managed to get on the civil affairs team because I convinced my CO that I had I'd been invited to go to the Peace Corps. And I could have gone to Venezuela without having any problem with the Army, but I chose to try to graduate from college first. And then I had lost out on an opportunity to go to the Fiji Islands. So this guy knew I could have run away from my military duty easily, but he recognized that I had something to offer the civil affairs program, so I did. And I got a job there working for them, or that unit.
Now, to jump a couple months, how was Christmas time?
Christmas time was interesting. I wrote to my church back in Austin, Minnesota, saying we'd like to have a lot of clothes sent out here as much as you can. We'd like to have you guys do a clothing drive, and then we'll distribute them among the mountain yard. And then I'd also said we'd like to have bars of soap. I said I noticed a lot of the mountain yards are washing themselves in the river, and it looks to me like they would like a bar of soap. So what happened was my church back in Austin, Minnesota, sent me 3 or 4 boxes that must have weighed 50 pounds each of clothing of all kinds, mostly summer weight clothing, and we gave it all away. We gave it to everybody. But the interesting thing too was I asked for a certain number of bars of soap, and we gave that all away, and everybody seemed to get one. And it was like the fishes and the loaves. It was, it was like, here's the last guy, here's the last bar of soap. It wasn't like there were 3 or 4 or 5 people still waiting for a bar of soap. There was nobody waiting, and we had no more soap. But then what happened was we got word during this Christmas exercise that a general liked to come out to our village and see how well we were doing. Now, when we lived in the Mountain Yard Village, we lived like McHale's Navy in the sense that we weren't wearing our uniforms all the time. We had our uniforms on, but we weren't disciplined in how we wore our clothing. And because the general was coming out, we had to clean the place up on Christmas Day. In other words, we had to do a lot of work on Christmas Day, throwing a lot of crap in the ditch and away from the camp, all kinds of things, just to make it pretty, so this guy could show up and tell the natives how very impressed he is with the work being done at this camp. And it was simply a public relations thing on his part, so he could feel like he's doing his duty. Well, what happened was he showed up in his helicopter with his entourage, and he walks into the base camp, and our CO at the time greets him. And we're standing there, and half of us have got our uniforms on, and the other half haven't, and we give him a traditional military salute, and we said, here's to you, pal. And he was led around and led away, and we never saw the SOB again. But there was some question raised about our level of discipline. But we were glad he was gone.
Now, to wrap up your story, what happened in August of 1970?
Well, I need to tell you first about my job with the Kit Carson Scouts. Those were Viet Cong and NDA soldiers who had changed sides, and these people were often discriminated against, and they were soldiers who really were in a difficult spot, and the United States should have done more to get these people out of country if they were still there when the country collapsed. But I'm not sure what happened to them. But many of them were really young guys, and they were really nice people, and I don't know whatever happened to them. But now you're asking about what? August of
1970.
Now, August of 1970, I came home. It's hard to believe I had extended myself in Vietnam by 60 days, and this was done so that when I got out of the Army, when I got out of Vietnam, I really got out of the Army. I was given a discharge from the Army, a discharge from active duty when I arrived in Spokane, Washington, and I then I was given a uniform, and I flew first class from Spokane to Chicago, and then from Chicago to Minneapolis. And when I got out off the plane, my family met me at the airport, and it was nice to come home. It was kind of sad, yeah, but I was glad to be home. And yeah, and what happened then was I got home about 7 o'clock in the morning. I stayed up until about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then I went to sleep. And I slept all that night, all the next day, and woke up. Let's say I got home on Tuesday. I woke up on Friday or Thursday afternoon. I was exhausted. That's the first time I went to sleep in a long time without worrying about getting rocketed or blown up, because when I was leaving Vietnam, the very day I was leaving, our military base was under attack and being rocketed and mortared and other things. A lot of things were going on. My story of Vietnam is one of luck. Something watched over me. I was very fortunate. Yeah.
Well, thank you for telling us our story. That's all for this interview for the Veterans History Project.
It's been my privilege, and I say this only in respect to all the other soldiers who are part of this project. Good for you, and may this be the end of war. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
My name is Jeff Bruno. We're doing an interview for the Veterans History Project here at Lasell College. And our group is Gina Grimes, Ronnie D'Souza, and myself, Jeff Bruno. Today's date is November 7th, 2013. We're here with Joe Bethany. So how are you?
I'm alive.
That's always good.
It's a good start.
It's a good start. It always is a good start. So we'll start out with what branch of the military were you in?
I was in the Navy.
Okay, all right. So Navy, you chose that.
I did.
Right, because that was a non-drafting branch, right?
Correct. That's correct.
Right. Well, how about we go back a little bit? Where are you from?
Boston.
Boston, Mass.
West Roxbury specifically.
West Roxbury. Yeah. What was your childhood like?
What was my childhood like?
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm one of 8 children, and I had a wonderful childhood. I was in a neighborhood where everybody knew each other, and played ball together. Whatever we did, it was had a lot of fun actually. Growing up, got a lot of good friends.
Did you have any family members in the military?
Yes.
Yeah.
My older brother was in the Army, the Green Beret, and my younger brother was in the Air Force.
What did your parents do at the time when you were growing up? What were they?
My father was a cab driver, and my mother was a homemaker. And there's eight children. There's 8 of us.
8 children.
Big fights for the bathroom in the morning.
Imagine.
Telling you, grab that door.
So, what year did you enlist in the military?
In October of 1965.
You went into the Navy in 1965.
A couple of days ago.
So what did you do in the Navy?
What I did in the Navy, I was a crash crewman on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier. I was actually a crash crew leader, and that's what we did. We the flight deck is broken up into 3 sections. Fly 1 is like by the catapult area. Fly 2 is in between, like where the island structure is on a carrier, and Fly 3 is where the arresting gear cables are and where the planes land. and that was my territory. I was in Fly 3. I was a blue shirt.
What kind of training did that require?
Let's see. After boot camp, I went to firefighting school in Philadelphia, and they put us in buildings and set them on fire, and said, "Okay, figure your way out," and and then we had mock crashes where we had to. They put planes on fire. We had to go and put the fire out, rescue the pilot, secure the aircraft, and make sure we come out of it alive, I guess, And that was about a 6 weeks of training.
So when did you deploy?
Right after that, I was assigned to the Franklin D. Roosevelt, which is an attack carrier. Its number was CVA 42. CVA stands for attack carrier, I guess, And we went to. I was named on a ship for a week, and the ship was based in Mayport, Florida, and we immediately disembarked and headed toward the Caribbean to undergo war games. It was called the ORI, Operation Readiness, and we had simulated war games for about 2 weeks, and getting ourselves ready to go to Vietnam.
So what was like the weather like when you were there? In your training and when you ended up into Vietnam.
Well, in boot camp, it was freezing cold. I remember having to guard a dumpster at midnight. I had the midnight to 4 o'clock watch. I know that I wound up inside that dumpster to stay cold, to stay warm. From there, Philadelphia was nice weather, and Florida, as you know, is beautiful. And then in the Caribbean was beautiful. Then in Vietnam, if we weren't in the monsoon season, which was pretty tough to be out in the water during monsoon season, it was pretty tropical weather basically. Didn't snow.
Didn't snow.
That would have been a trick. And so that's what the weather was like.
So while you were in the Navy, how often did you keep in contact with your friends and family from back home?
My mother wrote me every single day. Okay, and I'm a bad son. I must have wrote her like once every 6 months. And I kept in touch with a friend of mine who was also on another aircraft carrier. He was on the Forrestal, and he was on it when it blew up. And they, at any rate, we used to, we'd call each other every so often. We never really wrote. Wasn't a good writer.
So your time in the Navy, did you ever get comfortable working?
Never.
Never.
Not one day. Not one day. I hated every minute of it. I'm being honest.
Yeah.
And I didn't like it one bit. I didn't. But I did what I had to do, and I did it well. I didn't like it, but I did it well. And I did it repeatedly every day.
So what exactly did you do on the flight deck?
As a crash crewman, right, is when you got to imagine an aircraft carrier, right? What you normally see when you see it on TV, you always see the planes taking off in a catapult, going, oh, wonderful,
Yeah.
Back in the fantail where we were, right, all the planes, these are big Phantom jets, they're all revving up. They're all revving up, and you get imagine like a row of say 15 to 20 jets on either side of the ship, on the port side or the starboard side, all revving up, getting ready to take off. Okay, and then we had they would taxi them up. As they were taxiing them up, 2 blue shirts had to be under the plane at all times. And we carried a chalk and we carried chains, all right? It's like I was in jail, And basically, if, you got to remember, we're on the ocean, we're in the water, okay? So if that ship tipped and that plane started sliding, right, we had to secure that plane, okay? And then as the planes are taxiing up, they're going over the arresting gear cables, okay? The arresting gear cables is a cable about that thick. So when the planes land, they hook it, right? And that's what slows the plane down, right? And so when the planes are going over them and we're under them, it's stretching, and then when the tire goes over it, bang, it snaps back. And if you don't pay attention, you break your legs. You break your legs, So that's kind of like what I did. I'd be under them. They'd launch them, and then once they launched them, then everybody would they'd line up all the they call them tractors. They're like low yellow cars that they used to tow the planes around, right, when they weren't running, and they'd line them up, and then we get ready to receive the planes that were launched previously, because it was a continual cycle. We'd launch and recover, launch and recover, launch and recover. And so I was always, I'd be sitting on a tractor, and the planes would be landing like from here to that wall, okay? And my job was to be the first person there in the event of a crash, and kind of close to a crash, but in case of a crash or some type of an accident that would happen. And try to rescue the pilot. If there's a fire, put the fire out, and secure the plane so it don't slide over the side of the ship and cause damage. You ever hear the old saying about a loose cannon sink ships? Can you imagine a jet sliding around? And then there were other jets on the. There were all different types of jets, and. There was the A3, which was what we called it a scooter jet, and it had a very the strut was very it would always like turn to a side and get locked there. Okay, so we would have to go under the jet and put a bar in the wheel and turn the wheel straight, and then as they're taxiing the jet up, we have to stay under it until it's clear. And then we have to pull the bar out, and then the plane would go by, and we'd go under the aft end of the jet, so you wouldn't get fried, because the exhaust would just cook you, And I can't tell you how many times people have saved my life, or them, by having like I had a plane turn on me, and I didn't see it. And it was like from here to there, and all the noise that's around you, you have to have goggles and headgear on, And the plane was I had my back to it. My plane was turning on me, and a good friend of mine grabbed me and knocked me down to the ground, and the thing. And he died later on, So it was like. It was a different kind of a war. You know what I mean? Like you were fighting all the elements around you. You were fighting these jets that were very dangerous. We had people sucked into the intake. That's not very pretty. Okay, and these jets are revving at a high rate of speed, and if you're under it, you're close to the intake, right? You get sucked. The whole body is sucked right in, and it spits you out the other end of the jet. That's enough to stop operations. And then we had guys walk into propellers. Like one time we were operating at night, and when we were operating, right, we operated about a mile and a half off the coast of Hanoi. We were in North Vietnam waters. Okay? And so the whole carrier was red lights. Even if I had a flashlight, it was red. Right? It was like really eerie. So you have all these red lights, and you have all these jets revving up. And you're getting ready to launch. And I remember getting things were hitting me. I knew something was wrong. everything stopped. And then they informed us that someone had walked into the propeller, and we were getting hit with his body parts, from the back end of the ship, And but to give you an example, is like I probably went in with 100 men in my division when I first went in, right? Out of the 100 men, I think only 2 of us, the originals, actually, completed the whole tour of duty. Most people were just hurt. They were hit by wristing gear cables. They were blown off the side of the ship. We were fighting basically. We were launching these jets that do over 2,000 miles an hour, and they're loaded with bombs. You know what I mean? And we're trying to get them up to the catapult. And so that's what I did every day. Launch and recover, and it was repeat all the time. And they considered it a very critical position, because when I say had lunch or something, I took a break, I get down to into the mess hall, right? And I go to the front of the line. All blue shirts go right to the front of the line, because they want us back up again. Never did laundry, never did KP, never did nothing. All I did was launch and recover, and went on for you sometimes do 2 months at a clip. 2 months, and you're working 7 days a week, and you get exhausted. It gets, and sometimes you make mistakes, and sometimes you pay for it dearly, and sometimes you get lucky, But it's not like, it's like this is going on every single day. It's not like, you get a break and you can go for a swim in the ocean or something, but it's constant all the time, and that's what I did. Putting out fires, tying down ships, ducking under everything, And then one time a plane came in and crashed right in front of me, like over here, just crashed, and the debris hit me, and it threw me about 15 feet, and it killed the guy next to me, And it's really weird, because even though I was unconscious and I couldn't move, I knew everything that was going on around me. I even remembered when they dropped me down the stairs by mistake. That was exhilarating. And unlike it is today, like if you heard, oh, poor person, as soon as I regained consciousness, right, you okay? Yeah. Back upstairs again, And that's what I did for 2 years.
2 years. Wow.
And we provided, I know what we're doing, we're providing aerial cover for all the ground troops that were in Vietnam, and we're also bombing ammunition dumps or whatever that was, important to the North Vietnamese military, So that's kind of what I did. A lot of fun. You know why I hated it? But I would never let anybody take my place. I would never let anybody take my place. You know what I mean? It's just, it was just the way it was,
Yeah.
I didn't, when you joined, I joined because it was my obligation to my country and my duty to my country, And that's why I joined, And there was no question about me not going in or doing it or not doing it, right? It was when, and I want to do it at my terms. That's why I made the mistake of joining the Navy and winding up with an aircraft carrier, But that was a long time ago.
So you hit on this a little bit with that last part, but how did you adjust to the military or your military life? You were there for 2 years. Never
did. No, I did what they told me to do. So when they turned their back, I did what I wanted to do. Simple. I want to tell you a little story that I hear a drunken petty officer and a Marine sergeant arguing one day, right, over who's smarter, the Navy guys or Marine guys, you know, and they were blitzed, right? So the petty officer says to the Marine sergeant, he says, I'm going to tell you the difference between a sailor and a Marine, right? You take a rope and tie it on a lamppost and bring that rope around the corner, and you bring Marines in there, and you tell them, you tug on this rope until I come back, right? I could leave for an hour, come back, and they still be tugging on that rope. Yeah. So you put 4 sailors on that rope. As soon as I leave, they're going to drop the rope and look around the corner to see what they're pulling. Anyway, that was just, that was pretty funny. But you weren't a Marine, were you, Richard? So yeah, when you say that, yeah, I took orders from people who I thought were very stupid. I took not stupid, but yeah, stupid, and and I thought that at any rate, like I said, I humor them, whatever they want. Yes, sir. Right. As soon as they leave, I just did what I thought was right. You know, and so did I adjust? You have to. I mean, you have to adjust. I mean, you know, to certain things. You know, but you don't have to like it. I mean, you know, when I came back, and I heard about people going to Canada and all this other stuff. You know, it's just, you know, I mean, I couldn't understand it. You know, because you know we're all, you know, like, you know, I'm an American. This is my country. This is, you know, I know I went blindly. We all went blindly. No one, I don't think, you know, but that was the way it was during that time. You know, we're talking almost, you know, 40, almost 50 years ago, right? We didn't question authority like we do today, you know? And Facebook helps out a lot, and Twitter, I guess, you know, but we didn't have that kind of communication. We just knew that whatever they were doing, whatever we were doing, that whoever was sending us there, i.e. the politicians, right? They knew better than us. You know? They're running the country, right? Time to go, time to go.
So how many hours a day did you work?
About 18 hours a day.
18 hours a day.
18 hours up on that deck.
18 hours a day.
I mean, you remember there's a war going on, and there were always 2 carriers, you know, in the Gulf of Tonkin, and we were constantly, there were different squadrons on the carriers, right? And we would always be launching to, you know, to give cover to the ground troops or to, like I said before, bomb ammunition depots or whatever. But there was also a certain amount of, they had those, we had props on the plane that there were radar jamming, and there were information gathering planes. We called them Willy Fuds. They had a big round radar system in them, you know. So we did a lot of things that, you know, when we were launching these planes, not just bombing, I guess, you know, trying to do whatever reconnaissance that we could, you know. And but I tell you what's fun, what was really was when sometimes these planes, now these pilots, incredible. They are absolutely incredible. To get up there in a jet, right, and then go into battle and then come back to the ship. That ship, it's an aircraft carrier, but it's a needle in a haystack, you know? And then you're trying to land on it. And if you get rough water, right, and the carrier's going, whenever you recover aircraft, right, the carrier has to turn into the wind, right? You have to do almost 40 knots into the wind. That's a big piece of machinery moving pretty fast, right? And they have to come in and land on that. And sometimes the waves are going like this, you know, and I'm sitting on the deck, I'm watching it, I'm going, I'm doing the same thing. I'm sitting there, you know, I don't know, I'm looking for a hole to crawl into, you know, because this thing's gonna crash, you know. And but somehow they managed to pull it off most of the time, you know, and it was just, you know, those pilots were amazing, you know. And sometimes they'd crash, they'd go over the side of the ship, you know. Sometimes they'd crash, they wind up in the catwalk, you know. One time a pilot ejected while he was on the, hit the deck, crashed, he ejected, and he hit, there's a crane on the ship. The crane is designed to pick up these planes if they go on the catwalk, and he hit the crane and was killed instantly, you know. I put down the poor guy, you know, but so all this kind of crazy stuff, you know. And I said I would always imagine what it was like during World War II when they had straight decks and these planes come in straight, because the carrier I was on had an angle deck. So if a plane came in and missed, it would just veer off and turn around and reapproach, right? But I used to think World War II, these planes would come in as if they're going to crash. They crashed into everything that was in front of them, you know? It's amazing, you know? And it was funny because I know I said before that there wasn't too many things bigger than us out there until, the USS Enterprise relieved us. And I never looked up at a ship before in my life. That thing was immense, you know? And we were probably 40 feet off the water line, 40, 50. That thing must have been about twice that, you know? And it was quiet, super quiet. It was nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, you know? Super quiet, you know? And the carrier I was on, the Roosevelt, was a fossil fuel carrier. So every time that ship turned, you had to be conscious of all the billowing smoke that's coming out of the smokestacks, right? And if you didn't, adjust to that, you got engulfed in all the soot and smoke, and it's just one of the other things that you got to watch out for, you know. I'm getting carried away. Go ahead.
Don't worry about it. So, how long were you were in the Navy for? You said 2 years, right?
I was 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
How was readjusting to life?
It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. When I hadn't seen my family in quite a while, and when I came into Logan Airport, there was during that time, they take the stairs and put them up to the door, and you walk down the stairs, and everyone would be right there. It's not like today when they're in a terminal and they have a tunnel that comes up, you know. And so I had my uniform on, you know. I was proud to be back, you know. And so I got down the stairs, and I was promptly, a woman came up to me and spit in my face, called me a baby killer, you know. And I just looked at her, and I kept them to my family, you know, and you know what I mean. But it was something that stuck with me. My, up until now, it still bothered me, you know, that here I am. I think I just turned 20, you know, at the time, you know what I mean, and to be treated like that. I mean, it gets to a point where I was afraid to tell anybody I was a Vietnam veteran. They used to think I was a nut, you know. Of course, you're convinced right now, right? But, it was, like today when people come back today from Afghanistan, they're treated as heroes, which they should be, you know, because, they sacrificed for this country, you know, and, but the Vietnam veterans weren't. They were treated pretty horribly, you know, and it's funny because I was talking to Ed, and years ago you'd go to the VA hospitals, you know, if you needed treatment, and they were just, you know. Now today you go in today, and you tell them you're a Vietnam veteran, they will come in, you know, they feel bad, you know. And, it's 40 years too late, you know what I mean? But and then a lot of the people a lot of my friends that went in the Army, whatever, you know what I mean, a lot of them came back, and some OD'd on drugs, and a lot of them had issues, you know, and so it was during this, you know, like I get out in '67, right? So that period between 1967 to like 1972, it was really wild, you know. Everybody in the streets was protesting against the war, you know, and I would have none of it. You know, I just went about my business, whatever that was. You know, and I smoked a lot of grass. You know, with my wife. You know, and I spent about probably 10 years of my life. I would work, go home, and I would just smoke a bone and get to sleep. You know, otherwise I couldn't sleep. You know what I mean? And so that was kind of what life was like afterwards. You know, and then a lot of my friends and stuff. You know, we talk about things, and a lot of them are pretty bitter. You know what I mean? They're very bitter. But time is a healer. Time heals. You know, and I didn't really, have any ill will toward anyone for saying what they thought was right. You know what I mean? I don't like it when people are misguided by other people. Okay, and it's very easily done. The press does it today. You know, and they did it then. They just do it in a different way. Okay, and people as young people, right? Don't let people control you like that. Okay, don't let the press control you the way you think. Okay, there's people out there that actively try. I sound like a radical now, you know, but there are. There are people out there trying to control the way you think. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No.
Again.
Don't worry about it.
I'll be here all night. I'll keep going. But so just always be mindful of that. You know, don't be quick to judge. Okay, don't be. You know what I mean? And I think that there were times when I've been quick to judge, and I've been sorry for it. You know, and like I said, I feel like in a lot of ways we were misled. You know, and but nothing they can do about it. You know, and whether the war was just or not, you know, no one has those answers. I don't have those. I think even today you don't have those answers. You know, all I know was as an 18-year-old that my country needed me, and there I was. I didn't like it. Didn't like one bit of it, but I had an obligation, and I just fulfilled it. You know, and when I was discharged, or was being discharged, they offered me a lot of money to stay, and that's because no idiot in their right mind would do the job I was doing, you know. But they offered me a double rank, you know, and I said no. Then they offered me more money and a triple rank, and I still said no. You know, I just did what I had to do. See you later, I'm going home, you know. When I went home, somehow in your mind you think that everything's going to be different, everything's going to be wonderful, you know what I mean? Because you spent 2 years of your life being repressed by people who had the education of an ant, you know what I mean? And you're coming home and you think things are going to be different, things are going to change. Well, things did change. I changed. That's what happened. I was a 20-year-old in a 40-year-old body, you know? That's what I was, you know? And a lot of the guys were like that. A lot of the guys came back. They were like way beyond their age, the way they were thinking, the way they were looking at things, you know? You know, so that's kind of what I did. That's kind of how I felt, you know? And I've been very lucky in my life, you know? I admit it, you know? I've been very fortunate, and I appreciate that, you know? And I don't take anything for granted, you know, nothing, you know. And today we live in a world where there are still people out there that, you know, that want to do harm to us, you know, just because of the way you are, just the way you live, because of what, you know, the freedom that you have, you know, and they want to take that away from you. They want, not just you, they want to take it away from everybody around them, you know. So my next adventure, I'm going to join the Taliban in Afghanistan. Boy, are they crazy people, huh? But anyway, but that's our fault, because we kept them uneducated for 400 years. Not good, you know? I often wonder what would happen if we educated people rather than trying to repress them. You know what I mean? But I'm just one person. I can't, So I try and do what I can to the people that are around me. You know what I mean? I try and be, I just try and. I'm not afraid to say how I feel about things, to people, But in particular, I don't particularly feel like talking about this stuff, that much,
Yeah.
We don't talk about it that much, because it really, it lingers for a lot of years, But anyway, any more questions at all?
I think my last question is, would you do it again?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would do it again. I would do it simply because it was my duty for my country. End of story. I'd do it again. Right? I don't like it. I know I wouldn't like it. But you know something? You have an obligation, to this country. And the people that are running it right now, I think they abuse the hell out of this country. I know we're over-regulated, we're over everything, get carried away, and so I'm going to run for president next week. No, I'm not kidding. But yes, I would do it again. Yeah. I think anyone if I knew what I knew now, I would still do it again. You know what I mean? But to ask someone if they would do it again, being in the same frame of mind 45, 50 years ago, yeah, I mean, you do it again. My father, my grandfather, my uncles, they were all like, some are World War II veterans, some are Korean veterans, and they very proud to be an American, But you want to do things for the right things, for the right reasons, Not to plunder and pillage someone else's resources. That's kind of low,
Yeah.
But anything else? Want to know how old I am? I'm 40 years old. Look what it did to me. I see a lot of good people go through a lot of these same feelings that I go through, But I just feel that they've been through worse than me, And I think that what you're doing here is a good thing, And I have strong feelings. I have strong family values, and
Yeah.
I value, and you should cherish your family, really, because you never know when you're going to lose them, So that's it for me, huh?
All right. Yeah.
You
Well,
gonna give me the boot?
the proverbial.
Get one of those big canes to come in and pull you in,
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
This concludes our interview for the Veterans History Project.
Okay. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.